Get out, you're useless. As Director Hart's face turned bright red with anger, he threw a chair that was nearby at me. He pointed and laughed uproariously while watching me, trembling with shock and fear. Robert Hart, the head of the sales promotion department at a subsidiary of a major restaurant chain, was behaving arrogantly at a year-end party attended not only by employees from the headquarters, but also from all companies within the group, including those in management positions. Director Hart claimed to be related to the president, but as far as I knew, that was not the case. His antics had everyone at the venue pulling back in dismay, but he continued to hurl insults at me without concern for the chilly atmosphere. Suddenly, unable to just watch, my wife Kate confronted Director Hart. Despite her assertive attitude, Hart, who had not flinched at Kate, was shocked by another person who appeared, his face turning from red to pale blue. It seemed that his time of reckoning had come after all his high-handed behavior. The consequences were indeed severe, and it appeared he had more significant issues to deal with. My name is Tom Hart. I often hear that it's an unusual name, and I've never been fond of it since it feels like I'm losing to my name. Regardless of my grand name, I lead a very ordinary life. I'm 38 and busy with work during my prime years, but life is smooth sailing with a beloved wife and a son born between us. I work for a major restaurant chain, influenced heavily by my parents who love cooking. Seeing people happy and full makes me feel content, just like my parents. As the company's performance is doing well, a new store was opened in a large shopping mall. On my day off, I went to see how it was doing and was surprised at how busy it was from day one. I was reassured that there was no need to worry until I suddenly heard shouting from the back of the store. "Why can't you do something this simple? Are you trying to ruin this store?" The shock of the outburst surprised not only me but also the customers who turned to look in that direction. Right after that, a young woman who appeared to be a part-time worker ran away crying. Worried that something was wrong, I peered into the staff area and a large man glared back at me. "Who are you? This isn't a show. Get out once you've eaten." The man, apparently an employee in a suit without his jacket, was not behaving like someone who should be serving customers. Annoyed by his intimidating demeanor, I showed as much confidence as I could muster. "You're an employee, right? Isn't your attitude a bit inappropriate?" The man sneered and snorted lightly, then laughed and walked away. After that, the day ended without major incidents, but I was left feeling uneasy. I went back to the company and looked up the man. The employee information listed him as Robert Hart, the director of the sales promotion department. Although his department rarely involves direct store management, he had been pulled in to conduct promotional activities for the new store opening. However, for an employee of this group, his customer service attitude was unacceptable. When I visited the store again on the last day of the opening campaign, the store was very busy. While the store operations seemed fine, that wasn't my primary concern. Unfortunately, as I expected, Director Hart was manning the cash register with a troublesome look on his face. Without helping anyone, he just idly passed the time. I couldn't stand it and approached him, and he responded with a sullen voice. "Welcome. Hey, there are customers here. Someone take care of them. Does this store only have useless people?" As Director Hart remained unmovable despite the chaos in the store, I asked him in exasperation. "The other employees seem busy, but aren't you going to work?" With a sigh, I spoke, and Director Hart clicked his tongue, saying something unbelievable. "Can't you see? The store is busy right now. If you're just looking, get out." Not only did Director Hart treat me as a nuisance, but after making sure no one was watching, he forcefully pushed me out of the store. I stumbled and fell, and Director Hart reached out his hand to me sarcastically. "Oh, are you all right, sir?" With Director Hart rushing over as if I had fallen on my own, I heard chuckling around me. Unable to bear the cold stares from the others, I fled the scene with my face burning with embarrassment. A month after the embarrassing incident, I was transferred to a subsidiary of the group. Moreover, the department I was assigned to was the sales promotion department where Director Hart worked. It was my job to investigate the reasons for the declining sales, but most likely Director Hart was the cause. On my first day after the transfer, I was so shocked that I was speechless. "Are you the employee who's been sent here? You have a poor look about you. Try to be of some use to me." Director Hart thought of me as just a temporary employee, not even bothering to learn my name, and looked down on me. Looking around, all the department employees had pale faces, and their work efficiency was visibly poor. The biggest problem was during planning meetings, where everyone watched Director Hart's expressions and refrained from speaking out. The atmosphere was so abnormal that I felt compelled to ask the employees what was going on. However, everyone had a frightened look and no one would answer. After me, a new employee transferred in, but he also always looked anxious and seemed unmotivated at work. I couldn't just ignore the lifeless atmosphere in the workplace. I reached my limit and decided to confront Director Hart, albeit tactfully. "Director, I think it would be better if you took more of the employees' opinions into consideration." "Who are you again?" "Well, whatever. Are you an idiot to suggest something to me when you're useless?" Director Hart didn't even try to remember my name, and he was convinced that his own opinions were all that mattered. There was no point in saying anything. Instead, as a result of my complaint, he piled up a mountain of useless work on my desk. Some of the documents were completely unrelated, but he just insisted on having them done. Eventually, I lost the energy to talk back as I continued to work overtime every day, and I became physically and mentally exhausted. As the end of the year approached and the big year-end party was just a few days away, I was naturally supposed to attend as an employee still officially affiliated with the headquarters, despite being on assignment at the subsidiary. I was concerned that meeting Director Hart at the event could lead to trouble, but I couldn't miss it due to my position. I hoped to expose Director Hart's misdeeds in front of the headquarters executives at the event. However, when faced with Director Hart in person, I might hesitate to act that boldly. Filled with anxiety, I arrived at the big year-end party and kept looking around to avoid being spotted by Director Hart. As I ran out of drinks and headed to the drink counter, I unfortunately ran into Director Hart at the wrong time. "Hey, you're just a low-level temp, aren't you? Why are you here?" Director Hart's face was already flushed red, clearly drunk. "I was told to attend the year-end party." "Huh? This isn't a place where trashy employees like you can easily come." No matter how I tried to explain why I was there, the drunken Director Hart wouldn't listen and treated me dismissively. Irritated by my sighing, Director Hart suddenly grabbed my collar and brought his alcohol-scented face close to mine. "You wouldn't know, but I'm related to the president. You and I live in different worlds." It seems like Director Hart is too drunk, as I can't understand what he's saying. "Just move your hand away, please." As I pushed his hand away, Director Hart's face, already creased with anger, turned an even deeper shade of red, resembling a red ogre. "I am important, you know." In his drunken state, Director Hart was no longer making any sense. Thinking it was a good time to escape, I tried to sneak away, but at that moment, he grabbed a chair nearby and hurled it towards me with all his might. The chair hit a table set up for chatting, scattering food and drinks all around with a loud crash. A few inches closer, and I could have been seriously injured and sent to the hospital. Faced with this shocking development, I turned pale and trembled with fear. However, Director Hart, grinning maliciously, pointed at me and burst into laughter. "Incompetence like you should go home. You're ruining my drink." Looking around, not only the nearby employees, but also those watching from afar were speechless and pale with shock. In the midst of this bizarre atmosphere, only Director Hart's laughter echoed in the venue. Then, from a distance, my wife Kate approached me, showing a level of anger I had never seen before. Excuse me? Who do you think you are? You don't even know who he really is? Kate, standing boldly with her hands on her hips, looked down on Director Hart. Unaware of the situation, Director Hart ogled her from head to toe with a lecherous grin. Kate, a famous model known from TV and magazines, is slim and stunningly beautiful, a sight everyone envies. Drunk Director Hart, showing his lascivious intent, approached her. Are you that famous model, Kate? Are you here as a guest for the banquet? Keep your foul breath away from me. Despite Kate's clear displeasure, Director Hart, as usual, didn't listen to a word she said and continued his repulsive attempt to touch her. Then, Kate's open hand struck Director Hart's face with a clean hit, making a satisfying sound, and the startled Director Hart fell backwards. What are you doing? Who do you think I am? I'm Robert Hart. I share the same last name as the president. What are you even talking about? I can make women like you do whatever I want just by talking to the president. Kate and I looked puzzled at Director Hart's remarks. Director Hart, what are you really trying to say here? I don't know what you're trying to say, but if you continue to treat my husband this way, you should be prepared to face the consequences. Kate warned. Director Hart, taken aback, widened his eyes in surprise. Husband? You mean you are married to this worthless employee? Director Hart seemed confused, tilting his head in disbelief. At that moment, a man dressed in a high-end suit intervened between me and Director Hart, looking puzzled. What are you all doing here? Sir President, there's an employee here who shouldn't be. Please get rid of this worthless employee immediately. Director Hart, who had been sitting on the floor, started to sweat profusely as he began a self-centered explanation. However, the man, slowly taking my hand, turned to me. What's the new president doing here? It's almost time for your inauguration speech. Act more presidential. Sorry, Dad. Just dealing with some trouble. The man in the high-end suit, Frank Hart, is my father and the current president of the major restaurant chain. He was planning to step down soon to take up the chairman's role, and I was to be appointed the new president. This year's big year-end party was also the occasion to officially announce my appointment as the new president. The responsibility of being the CEO and president of a major restaurant chain felt overwhelming. Whenever I had to speak in public, I intended to leave it to the vice president, my father's most trusted. But I attended this year's party at my father's insistence to fulfill my responsibilities as president, though I had not expected such commotion. My father, smiling, squeezed my hand firmly, and Kate, with a wry smile, stood up and dusted off my clothes. Amid the warm atmosphere, I glanced at Director Hart, who was shivering and now pale with shock. What? You, the president? Why? Director Hart, in a panic, trembled and sweated profusely as he staggered backwards. Kate, with an irritated and tight smile, addressed him as if he were a villain in a comic book trying to escape. By the way, you mentioned something about being a relative or acquaintance of the president earlier, but there's no trash like you in our Hart family. What are you talking about, Kate? After hearing the full story from Kate, my father, frowning fiercely, glared at Director Hart. What do you mean by using the Hart Group's name when you have no relation to our family? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Intimidated by the two of them, Director Hart, who had been hesitating, quickly apologized. My preparation to become president involved transferring to Director Hart's department, but the outcome exceeded my expectations. My hobby is watching foreign dramas and documentaries, and my favorite is a famous show where the president disguises as a janitor or part-time worker to uncover hidden issues within the company. Pretending to be on business overseas, I toured the subsidiaries under the guise of inspecting their operations, searching for various issues and improvement points. Essentially, I was mimicking my favorite show to make the company better. Working there, I realized that there are always areas for improvement in underperforming subsidiaries. This time, I chose to work under Director Hart, but I was overwhelmed by the appalling situation far beyond my expectations. His department was in the worst condition compared to others. When I revealed that my assignment was like a hidden camera prank, Director Hart's face went from pale to white. Director Hart, you understand what I'm getting at, right? What do you mean? I've been working hard. There couldn't be such serious faults, right? Director Hart's self-centered excuses were exasperating. Finally, even I was at a loss for words. I understand your point of view, Director Hart. Please go home for today. Eager to escape the painful stares of those around him, Director Hart ran towards the exit. However, he tripped over his own feet and dramatically fell, crashing into a table laden with food. As he lay there covered in food, the attendees couldn't hold back their laughter anymore. Soon after, the branch manager of the subsidiary where Director Hart worked rushed over to me, sweating profusely. Feeling someone's gaze, I looked over to see Director Hart, his face contorted with fear, looking back at me. The branch manager, keeping his head down, glared resentfully at Director Hart from the corner of his eye. Director Hart, overwhelmed with fear, collapsed but mustered his last strength to crawl away on the floor. The next day I went to the office as usual. Good morning. In the gloomy department, the employees greeted me listlessly as usual. However, Director Hart, who had just learned of my true identity yesterday, was visibly startled, dropping documents from his desk to the floor as he collapsed. Good morning. He was as shocked as if he had seen a ghost. His bizarre reaction made the other employees look at him curiously, wondering what was happening. Director Hart, are you all right? I'm fine. His face pale and drenched in cold sweat, Director Hart was shaking and couldn't speak properly due to panic. Despite his dramatic transformation, the employees, who had grievances against him, did not offer any kind words. Instead, they chuckled at his miserable, frightened appearance. Amidst this, I noticed an unfamiliar envelope among the documents he had dropped. Inside was a resignation letter. Director Hart, what is this? It's well. Hearing murmurs of again from the surrounding employees solidified my suspicions. It's a resignation letter from an employee who left recently. I had heard rumors, but it seemed Director Hart had been forcing employees who couldn't tolerate his tyranny to resign, processing their departures as voluntary. Moreover, he had them mail their resignation documents, which he would submit himself. By doing so, he would change the bank account details on the forms to his own, redirecting their severance payments to himself. Director Hart, this is a serious issue. You shouldn't expect to continue working here. Though he prostrated himself in apology, such gestures were far from enough for forgiveness. When I reported all of Director Hart's misdeeds, including this issue with the resignations, to the branch manager, the manager himself turned pale and trembled. Regrettably, I had to have the branch manager accept a demotion and a pay cut for neglecting to address Director Hart's abuses. Within a week, Director Hart's dismissal for misconduct was formally decided. Moreover, he was ordered to repay the misappropriated severance payments to the former employees and compensate the company for damages. Director Hart's dismissal shed light on a mystery that had always baffled the employees. According to interviews with them, Director Hart had claimed to be a relative simply because he shared my family name even before he became a director. While it was a coincidence that we shared the same last name, I was unaware it had been misused. Perhaps my father, busy with his duties as president, hadn't noticed either. I also think my lack of public presence might have been to blame. Although it was a rather naive thought, it seems to have been quite effective. Apparently, Director Hart's ascent to his position was partially influenced by his shared last name. Due to the penalties for his misdeeds, Director Hart had to empty his savings along with his severance pay. He lost not only his job but also faced a divorce initiated by his wife. Eventually, the divorce was finalized, and now he lives a modest life alone. I later came across his name unexpectedly in a small town, where he had been involved in a dine and dash incident at a local store. He tried to flee but tripped over his own feet and was caught red-handed. This unfortunate event spread quickly within the company, turning his name into a source of jokes everywhere. A few months after officially taking over as president, one of my first initiatives was to ensure transparency within the company to prevent a recurrence of incidents like those caused by Director Hart. Despite everything, you could say Director Hart served as a cautionary tale that ultimately benefited the company. Based on the improvement points identified during visits to various subsidiary-operated stores, we updated our training manuals, which significantly improved our performance metrics. And so, we began to implement these new guidelines in newly opened stores. The manual functioned well, though the store was busier than expected, and even I, who stepped in to help, was overwhelmed. Surprisingly, despite the long wait, there were no customer complaints. Feeling that something was off, I went outside to check and saw a middle-aged security guard entertaining waiting customers, helping them pass the time with smiles. Approaching the guard to express my gratitude, I was surprised to find it was indeed Director Hart, albeit somewhat gaunt. "Ah, Mr. President, it's busy today, isn't it? Please don't worry about outside, I've got it covered." Thanks to Director Hart, the store's opening day proceeded without any issues. I wanted to thank him afterward, but he had already left for the day. Throughout the opening campaign, he worked diligently without taking a day off. When I finally managed to thank him on the last day, he apologized deeply, a stark contrast to his previous demeanor. "I apologize for the trouble I caused before. I don't know if this can make up for it, but I'm glad if I was able to be of some help." Seeing how much Director Hart had changed, I couldn't help but feel pleased, and a smile came naturally. "Would you mind if I request you specifically as the security guard for our next new store?" Director Hart, embarrassed, simply nodded again and left. Watching his confident back, an idea struck me. I planned to incorporate the hospitality I had witnessed from Director Hart into the company-wide manual. I was confident that his renewed efforts would continue to bring smiles to many more of our customers.